Hey, Husker fans, welcome back to another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast. And we are here on this Monday morning after a late night for Husker Nation, watching out for the announcement of Preston Taumua. And he's in now. So the four-star offensive guard, offensive tackle, the number one ranked player in the state of Hawaii is coming to Nebraska. He's committed as part of the 2024 class. So that was a huge get for the Huskers. Danny, I know that you stayed up late last night to post for Husker Big Red. So, appreciate you putting in the effort. But what are your, for people who didn't see your post, what are your thoughts on, Preston Tamua?
Well, I think, he's a very physical lineman, and I feel like I've said that a lot about this lineman class. You talk about a guy like Gibson Pyle, for example, a player that has flown a little bit more under the radar, like Landon Davidson. I think what we're seeing here is Donovan Raiola having a little bit more say in who he recruits and finding a style of lineman that he wants to work with. It also helps when your coaching staff is offensive line centric. So, they probably help with the evaluations, of course, as well. And it's really interesting to see all of the linemen that Rayola has recruited, for example, have the same type of style, and it's that physical type of play style. Tamua is another physical lineman. He gets good leverage when the ball is snapped. He is a sturdy lineman, so it's good to see the offensive line have a cohesive recruiting strategy, and it's good to see Donovan Raiola really play a big hand in that because we talked about it on the show. I had my doubts on him as a recruiter, and the jury is still out as to what we're going to see on the field. But I do like the effort that he's been putting in over the last, you know, I'd say probably 6 months or so, because it started with Gibson, now it's Preston, Landon Davidson, and so I think Rayola definitely deserves a lot of credit here.
Yeah, this is definitely, I would say, the biggest, win of his, recruiting career so far at Nebraska. Although I do think that, like Gunnar Katula is going to be really
Yeah.
good, Gibson Pyle. So, the rankings, like we've talked about before with offensive linemen, don't always matter as much. And I
No.
personally, I think that Preston should be probably ranked higher too. He's, if you look at his rankings, I think he's 235th overall, according to the 24/7 composite rankings. But he's a consensus four-star. Every service has him as a four-star. He's in the top 200 in a couple. And I know that he's listed as an interior offensive lineman, but I think that he can play tackle, at least right tackle.
Yeah.
He's pretty athletic. He moves pretty well. He played some tackle last year in high school. And I wouldn't be surprised if he played. He just looks like a right tackle to me. And it is interesting with the height. And I don't know if that is a totally like a Rayola thing or a staff thing, but they definitely, I mean, they needed to get away from having so many, you can't recruit every guy in your offensive line to be like 6'6", 6'7", 6'8".
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily help you, especially at those guard positions. And you see a lot of tackles, right tackles that are 6'4", 6'5". I mean, yeah, it looks nice and it looks good, but if the guy can't bend, to block a
Yep.
pass rusher, then it doesn't really matter. The long arms, that's a big part of it. Because you're 6'8", you're going to have long arms and can keep them, supposedly it, basically away from the quarterback or kind of push them past the quarterback essentially. But at any rate, this was a huge commitment, second, rated in the class right now. And yeah, number one player in Hawaii. So they've got the number one player in Montana, Hawaii, in Nebraska. Three places that do tend to be underranked a little bit, but in the class now ranked 18th overall, according to 24/7 sports. So yeah, it's I think it's a really big get and one of the best, recruiting victories so far for this entire staff, I think, to be honest.
Yeah, and it's interesting the point you made about some of the shorter linemen, so to speak, and you're seeing it across college football too. Teams are recruiting more for athleticism and how well they move, and not just, oh, you're 6'9", 350 pounds, let's recruit you. It's becoming more so of a like you said, can you bend? Can you kind of move your feet? Can you get out on a screen pass? It's stuff like that that's becoming more important, and I think it's good for the staff to kind of recognize that as well, especially as the game of football in general kind of is catering to the offensive side of things more.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think, there was kind of the Polynesian connection there, and that, definitely helped out, I think. Especially you can see that with, Hawaiian players a lot. Um, and yeah, it was an important commitment. I know that everybody's, focused on Grant Bricks, and I do think Nebraska still needs a left tackle type, which would be nice to have that guy that's like 6'6", long arms and what all that type of stuff. But I just think that looking at this entire class, people have talked about they need to get blue chip offensive linemen, and they went out and got one and a really good one. A guy that he visited Oregon, Auburn was in the mix, Arizona was in the mix. All those teams were kind of being talked about there at the end. So this is another good recruiting win for Nebraska, kind of across the board. I think it's their sixth blue chip, in the composite rankings for 24/7 Sports. So I mean that's a pretty solid number. That's going to have Nebraska, their blue chip ratio, the number of guys that are blue chips, it's going to be, 25, 30%. You'd like to see it around 50. That's what they say you need to, the kind of talent level you need to have to compete for a national championship. So I do think it's doable to get there at some point, but right now they're making a lot of progress. And this is another really good get. They're probably at least kind of in the lead for Grant Bricks or close. Although I know Notre Dame came in with an offer recently, and that may have changed things.
Auburn too, if I'm not mistaken, right? Aren't they kind of on the radar for Bricks as well?
Alabama is. I don't know. I don't
I'm
think
trying to
that
think.
Auburn is. I could be wrong. I mean, things happen quickly, but I know
I'm
Kansas State is there and Nebraska. He took a visit to Alabama. Auburn could be in the mix or maybe offered recently, but Notre Dame did offer too, so that could be. Although they're training for another offensive tackle in the 2024 class, so who knows?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see who they take next. I would love Bricks. I mean, I really like his tape as well, but I think landing Tamua was a really really solid get, and I kind of you just mentioned so many blue chippers, and I say so many because we're coming off a losing season last year with a new coaching staff. Imagine if this program gets more established, what they'll be able to do. I mean, I think again, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Matt Rule and this coaching staff have done a really good job of selling their vision to recruits and kind of outlining where this program is going to go. And I think a lot of these star recruits are really buying into that, and that's really good to see. And I'm hoping that continues, and that we can get some wins to back it up as well, because that will make recruiting even easier, in my opinion.
It will open a lot of doors for Nebraska, and that will, even this year, if they put together a solid season, they'll have more of a chance with some guys, in December, because there is a lot of fertile, recruiting to be done, in those last couple of months. Not necessarily, number wise, not quantity, but there's some really quality players that you can get that time of year, and some of them will be lower ranked guys, and you'll see some guy that's ranked like 1,000th, and like Georgia and Alabama and like Michigan are fighting for him, and that's not because it's just because they can see the development on tape, and sometimes it does take the recruiting services a little bit of time to catch up. We've seen that numerous times with Nebraska commitments. So um yeah, you just don't need to focus on the rankings with all of these guys, because some of them are going to move up, and that will change the board a little bit too. And if you win, that's going to open up more doors for you with a lot of those recruits. And but this class is getting pretty big though. 24, that's bigger than I even thought it would be. I thought it would be about 20. So I think it's interesting. Matt Rule's definitely investing more in high school recruiting than I think he's going to in the transfer portal. I think I'm not that Nebraska's not going to land guys in the transfer portal, but I don't think he's going to take as many guys from the portal as we thought he was going to based on the first year. I think that was a kind of a one-off deal.
Yeah, and I think it was a good base to start with for 2023, and it's kind of nice of having the luxury of having your class essentially completed by the time December rolls around. Because I remember a lot of times, I'm thinking, 2021, even to some degree, 2 years ago when Nebraska really had to rush to fill out their class in December, and now they don't have to do that. They can, like you said, just take some of the better players. So during that time period, so it's good to see them, not have to rush and not have to worry. They have, their 2024 class, and as long as they take care of things on the field, the rest will take care of itself. And they have, and we talked about this, they have a relatively easy schedule this season, in my opinion. So this is the year to do it and ensure that all those commits, stay.
Yeah, it's definitely more manageable. There's not they do have to host Michigan, and that's going to be a tough game. But outside of that, I mean, I think that every game is probably winnable at least. Look, just I don't think there's a team in the Big Ten West that Nebraska can't beat. I guess I'll just say that. So I think just even last year they could have beat every team in the Big Ten West if they had executed properly, and just the close loss factor. So hopefully that will lead to some more recruiting wins in the fall. But this class is set up really nicely. We talked about some of the potential needs. I do think offensive tackle is still a need. I do think that this team needs a pass rusher, and some like a true edge rusher, at least one in this class. And then, potentially secondary linebacker, because, you talk about, we talked the other day about there might not be as big of a need at linebacker because, like Braylon Prude could drop down or, shoot, I'm blanking on the guy's name from Colorado.
Rex Guthrie.
Yeah, Rex Guthrie could bump down to linebacker. Well, that's still so. If Nebraska wants to have that many defensive backs, that could be why they're looking at more, defensive backs. Amari Saunders, maybe Caleb Benning too. I'll be interested to see if he visits this month. If he does, then I think that changes things a little bit. Just puts him on the radar. And I think it's interesting that Amari Sanders hasn't quite committed. And I kind of have a hunch that if I think he's going to commit within the next month or so, and I just have a hunch if Caleb Benning doesn't visit Nebraska in this July period, that Amari Sanders is probably going to commit to Nebraska.
Yeah, and you mentioned, some of the players that could, drop down as well as play defensive back. I mean, on the roster right now, I think of a guy like Chief Borders that will be able to do that as well. So there's a lot of different options that we have, and a lot of ways you can mix and match. And this defense is going to be fun to watch. I had a lot of fun watching it during the spring game, and I think there's a lot of different combinations that Nebraska can throw out there. Now, like you said, the big question is, will Sanders commit? And if not, what does that mean for Caleb Benning? If Sanders doesn't commit or, if there's no decision made, then I'd say that opens the door again for Benning.
Yeah, and
Not
that's
that the
kind of
door was ever closed, but you know what I mean.
yeah, and he could move around or just be taken, as an athlete, provide some different, at different positions. So, wanted to kind of segue to another topic here. Nebraska got their 24th commitment, with Preston Taumua and for another four-star offensive lineman. We talked about some of these guys here, but just kind of off the putting you on the spot, who do you think the next commitment for Nebraska is going to be? When do you possibly think that might happen?
Who do I think it's going to be, or who do I want it to be? Because I have two different answers.
Well, who do you think it's going to be?
Probably Sanders. I mean, with the crystal balls he got at the beginning of the month of June, I believe. I have a feeling that Sanders may be, trending towards Nebraska. I mean, he talks with Coach Evan Cooper a lot, and so I believe Nebraska's doing work behind the scenes there. I just wonder when he's actually going to commit.
Yeah, I would. That would probably be my answer to Amari Sanders, and I do think it'll be sometime in August. I think he'll commit. So yeah, these next 2 weeks or this last, there's a little bit of a recruiting period again at the end of July where recruits can take visits and things like that. So we'll see if it's kind of right before fall camp. I think it's July 28th to the 30th. I think there's like one weekend. Michigan has like a barbecue they host for recruits, so it's mostly for unofficial visits most of the time. I know Nebraska's hosting a player for an official visit, I think, over that time period. So there's some recruiting to be done, but mostly, after that, it's going to go into another dead period, and then I think we'll see, more decisions because a majority of recruits like to decide before, their senior seasons. Not all of them. Some of them, Caleb Benning is one. He's taking his to December. Some other guys will do that too. But yeah, my prediction would be Amari Sanders and sometime in early August.
The player that's visiting that you mentioned for the last weekend of July is Devo Tuataga, the edge defender from Eagle Mountain, Utah. He was a guy that you really liked. I haven't really read too much up about him, but he is scheduled to start his visit on July 28th. So there's the visitor that you were looking for that weekend. So he's an interesting, player as well, just in the sense that he could potentially commit later. I'm not too sure because the guys from the West Coast tend to commit a little bit later than others.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that visit. That'll be important. Oregon just hosted them for a visit, so they're probably the leader right now. So Nebraska's going to have some work to do. They did beat out Oregon, in this latest recruitment, but it's always hard to tell how much one school's pushing for the other. But I mean, all indications are. I mean, Oregon just got a expert projection, from one of their insiders on June 23rd, and then it kind of flipped around in Nebraska's favor. So at any rate, he is an edge rusher to watch. We've talked about Jay Sean Ross. Those are the two names that I'm focused on right now after Jacob Smith committed to Michigan last week. And yeah, Caleb Benning. There's not a whole lot of guys, to on the board right now, I guess, to talk about.
Grant Bricks, he's the guy that I'm
Yeah.
watching. I would love him. When I asked, is this question about who's it gonna be and who do you want it to be? I want Grant Bricks. I really do, and he's a guy that I'm watching for sure. I'm wondering when he's gonna make his decision. I read somewhere that he was gonna decide before the start of the season, high school season. So I'll be watching his recruitment closely because if we can land Grant Bricks as well, man, what a group of linemen that we have for this 2024 class. I mean, that's an impressive group right there, and Bricks would just be the icing on the cake.
Yeah, Bricks really would be a big addition. We'll see. He hasn't really said, anything in terms of a date. He talked, I think, vaguely about, deciding before the season starts. So, we'll see. It's interesting because Kansas State has one crystal ball. Nebraska has the expert projection from On3, and I think that they're the leader according to the On3 prediction machine. Still, yeah, 72% right now for the but that doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot. It just means that they did get a prediction from one of the Nebraska experts. So that's why they've kind of got that lead. They did host them for an official visit. So yeah, it seems like a Nebraska Kansas State battle. Alabama's in there. I think that Notre Dame kind of got in with an offer. At least they're showing some interest. So I didn't see that when I looked at the page, but sometimes they aren't always updated. But at any rate, it's a contested recruitment, and he's the fifth ranked offensive tackle according to the composite rankings. So he would be a huge get for the Huskers.
And I'm not sure how much Alabama is honestly really involved in his recruitment because it seems like they offered him a little bit late. And if Alabama really wants a guy, then they're going to go get him and offer him quickly, and he's going to commit. So I wonder what the interest is there for Alabama. I wonder how much of a player they are.
Yeah, I mean, it probably depends what their offensive tackle looks like. I know they just took I think an interior offensive lineman that was like a top 50 player, but I'm really not familiar enough with their board to comment, I guess, on what their needs of tackle would be. But yeah, that's probably a safe, a safe place to. They're probably just trying to keep, somebody else there, and then if something doesn't go their way, they can possibly pivot. Try to get him back for a game in September, whatever, and go from there.
It's nice to have that luxury, isn't it? If this 5-star doesn't commit to us, well, we have Grant Bricks to fall back on. So I mean,
Yeah.
maybe
Well,
one day we'll
that's
get there.
well, no, we won't because and I'm not saying that means anything about the success of Nebraska. It's just there's so many built-in
Yeah,
people don't realize, I don't think, how many really good recruits are in the state of Alabama.
yeah.
So I mean, just go, and then Georgia too. I mean, that's another thing
Florida.
people yeah, I mean there too, but
Yeah.
even, within the state of Alabama, there's like Alabama and Georgia really don't need to even like recruit that much out of their own state. That's how loaded they are, especially Georgia. Alabama, they have to a little, but there's just so much more talent there than there is in Nebraska, and that just has to do with like population and stuff like
Oh
that. I mean,
yeah.
that's a big part of it. Then there is a lot of talent in Nebraska. Christian Jones, who actually got another crystal ball this week from Brian Christopherson. So that's kind of something else to watch too. So I mean, there is talent. There's just not as much of it.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
but at any rate, I do think that Nebraska can get to they can get to a level where they're being very choosy about how they're recruiting. But the evaluation process is always going to be key, and so is developing them, because Nebraska's just not going to get 5-star prospects like Alabama and Georgia. And I actually got into a debate with some people on this on Twitter one time, and they were, trying to. I mean, Nebraska's just never been a 5-star loaded program, even during the Tom Osborne glory years. You know what I mean? Like looking back at the '90s, yeah, there probably would have been a few 5-stars. Like maybe like probably Tommy Frazier. He would, at least would have been like, a top 50. He was a pretty, heavily recruited guy, like maybe Amon Green. I don't know about the Peters guys, Wistroms. There were some really good players, but like Lawrence Phillips definitely would have been a 5-star. But it's not like a team that was chock full of like 5-star type guys, but they were built on their offense and defensive line strength and development, getting really good players in the state, a dominant walk-on program, and they whipped your ass in the trenches, and they played really good defense, and that was kind of like their formula. And so you don't have to, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. You don't have to have a bunch of 5-star players to win. You do need 4-stars, you do need blue chips, but they don't have to be the elite of the elite of the elite.
And you mentioned, quiet recruitments a little while back in the show. I feel like Christian Jones has kind of had one as well, and to get another crystal ball in our favor is huge. I mean, Jones, I really like Jones. I know some people don't. I really do. I like his motor and his ability to, run laterally, and I feel like he could be a great piece in a 3-3-5 defense that relies a lot on pursuit and, positionless football and just getting to the ball carrier. So the fact that we seem to be trending with Jones is certainly a really, really good sign. And you talk about, you know, in-state recruiting. The 2025 class already has 2 solid commitments in Tyson Terry and Caden Vermas. You add Christian Jones in there, you got a nice little trio.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if Christian Jones, if that crystal ball from, Christofferson means like a commitment is coming, because that's what happened with, like, I'm trying to think back with Tyson Terry, but I don't think he even announced like a date per se. I think he just dropped a graphic. Boom, he was committed. Am I wrong
Tyson
on that?
Terry happened fast. I don't think you're wrong on that at all, actually, because I was very surprised when he committed because there was a bunch of crystal balls that were dropped, I believe that Wednesday. I'm looking it up right now, and
Yeah, there was a few. There was like, yeah, there was a few for both sides. And maybe he did say like I don't remember him putting out a tweet that like, oh, I'm gonna commit on this date. Maybe he did. I could totally be wrong, but
no,
it
he
did
didn't.
happen fast. So
Tyson Terry was quick because I remember being excited about landing Mario Buford, and then that Friday, all of a sudden, Tyson Terry, boom, he committed, and he got a crystal ball on, June 8th. He got, let's see, another crystal ball on June 8th, and he committed shortly thereafter. He got 3 crystal balls the day before on June 7th. So I feel like, in terms of crystal balls and things like that, that recruitment and that commitment, excuse me, happened quick. And it feels like, the crystal balls were, just, hours from the actual announcement. I don't really think Terry put out anything, saying I'm going to be committing on this date. I think he just committed, and that one was a good get as well.
that was a good one. So we'll see if Christian Jones follows like a similar timeline. I think that would be, obviously spectacular for Nebraska. You mentioned it, but with Vermoss and Terry, that would put him with the top 3 guys in the state committed. So that would be huge. I mean, you can't really do much better than that, and especially starting in 2025. I mean, that would be a great kind of springboard. And then you put together a solid season this fall. I mean, I know that could potentially help 2024, but even bigger, like, and even longer term, if you have a winning season this year or win 8 games or whatever, like that's going to propel you in the 2025 class, where they're starting to build some of those relationships now. And there's like you reported it with HuskerBigRed.com. You wrote on it, a top 100 receiver from Miami, taking a visit. So in the 2025 class, so being, if they can start winning this fall, like that's really going to set them up for, I mean, if this class finishes in the top 20 or top 25, next year could be, top 15, top 12 with a strong regular season. So that's kind of a big thing to pay attention to as well.
And quite honestly, you're going to see the rankings dip as the season goes, and in the in the recruiting classes get fuller with each team. And for in this instance, I don't really care about rankings because I feel confident in the recruits that we have landed. And I'm wondering if they're going to land the athlete from Texas that we talked about earlier this week, whose name I'm blanking on. But he's a running back, so I'm wondering if there's any interest there. I know he was going to take a visit, and so we'll see what happens there as well. I mean, there could be more coming. Um, Derek McFall is the name I'm thinking of. So who knows? I think that this program has a chance to really kind of um, round out the classes and build out for 2025 and start off the 2025 class strong. And winning will only help things. I keep
Yeah,
saying that, but it's true.
and the season, we should mention this here is before we kind of start to wrap up on this kind of recruiter related episode, but the season starting basically 2 weeks from today is the first day of fall camp, so something to keep in mind. Very close to the focus being on the football field more than recruiting. I think there'll be some recruiting news. Obviously, guys are going to take a lot of visits during the fall during games and stuff like that. So there'll be stuff to follow there, but we'll definitely be shifting a little bit here more towards football, position previews, predictions, and all that type of stuff with fall camp 2 weeks away. Man, can you believe
I
it?
can't wait. Yeah, I can't wait till like actually a football on the field to talk about instead of just recruiting.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty exciting, and I'm just the getting the media reports and the everything. It's getting all the kind of sneak peeks that we get from Husker Twitter and everything going on. And I think Nebraska does a great job with their social media and kind of keeping the fans engaged. So we're coming up. It's August 30th or 31st with the Minnesota game. I'm totally
The
blanking.
30,
I know it's one of those days.
one of those days, the 31st. And before we head out, I mean, just quickly, Ethan Piper, Jeff Sims, and one more whose name I'm blanking on for the media days for the
Luke Reimer.
Luke Reimer. There we go.
Yeah.
And so I think those are good choices. I mean, Reimer's been a mainstay in the program. He suffered some injury issues last year, but I think he'll be a good choice. Ethan Piper is an interesting choice because I wonder if he's gonna start on the offensive line in some capacity. Usually, when they send out the representatives to Big Ten media days, the players that go there have a pretty big impact on the team once the season starts. So, and then Sims is obviously, he's the quarterback. He's the one that everybody wants to hear from and see. So Piper's an interesting choice, and I'm wondering how much of a role he'll play this season, and how much of an impact he'll have on the line. Because we talked about it before, I really like him. So that was an interesting choice to me, but in a good way, not a bad way.
I agree. He played well last year. He can play center or guard, and that might be a hint from the coaching staff that he's actually, that maybe he's in this. He might be starting. He might be
Right.
the
Yep.
starter at one of those guard spots, and we just have been overlooking him a little bit. And I think that'll be a great sign for Nebraska because that they have there's some quality players I think at both guard spots. We can debate about that, but there's guys there that have played a bunch of football before at least. With Nordine Noeli and Turner Corcoran. So if he beats those guys out, Latowski, I think that is pretty solid. It really wouldn't shock me. He played pretty well last year. And, at any rate, he's proven something leadership wise to get that done. So and that's good reminder. Big Ten Media Days next week. So yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk about here in the next coming weeks with Nebraska football. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Make sure you comment. We love to hear what you think or your thoughts on different recruits or commitments and whatever is going on with Nebraska football. Make sure you hit the like button, share our content so other Nebraska fans can come across it. And make sure you hit up our merchandise. I'll put a link in this week. I was a little tardy last week, but I did get it in there. And we've got some new stuff in it. We've got a sweatshirt. We've got a T-shirt. We've also got a Husker Big Red mug. So, you can wake up with, drinking coffee out of your Husker Big Red mug while you watch the Husker Big Red, podcast. So,
Or the Kool-Aid out of your Husker Big Red mug.
I'm drinking the cool, I'm
I'm
feeling that.
really starting to drink the Kool-Aid this year, and I feel more optimistic. But I have no problem drinking the Kool-Aid, especially if we keep recruiting these four and 5-star linemen.
Yeah, that was funny. So, anecdote I got for my day job, I interviewed Brian Bushini yesterday.
Oh wow, that's cool.
So he's from where where I work for the newspaper. That's where he went to high school, and so I talked to him, and Yeah, I told him I told him I'm drinking the Kool-Aid.
What did he have to
So,
say?
oh, he just chuckled, he said like thanks for the support type of thing, but
Because
he
honestly, he was one of our most consistent players last year.
yeah, and I'll say this. I don't want to share too much from my. I'll
Yeah,
be writing it up today, but yeah, he said one of his motivations coming back is he thought his season was so poor last year that he didn't
really,
want his career to be on that sort of note. So you
really.
should
Nice.
expect a really. After talking to him, I think this guy is going to go to the NFL. I'm going to make that prediction, and he's got a tremendous leg, but he's really into his craft with punting. So we got a good one, and he's really excited to work with Coach Foley. So which who wouldn't be?
Hey, punters are people too. So I mean, got to give love to the punters. And if he thinks he had a poor season last year, then I can't wait to see what happens this year because I thought he was one of our better players. I don't know what that says about the rest of the team, but I really
Yeah,
liked the work he did last year.
he was nagged with some injuries. He said,
Yeah,
almost the whole second. He really wasn't healthy the second half of the season. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he does this year. But yeah, it was fun catching up with him, and hopefully we'll have some more guys, on the show here coming up in the
yeah.
future. But I just can't wait that we're coming up. It's like so close to that first game of the
I
Matt Rule
know.
era, and we can stop the speculation of what Matt Rule's team is going to look like and actually just watch it on the field. So
I
that will be
know,
fun.
and we're gonna be doing, I think, a lot of YouTube streams or playback streams this season, so that's gonna be fun too. I can't wait to do that now that I actually know how to work it and what I'm doing, so that'll
yeah,
be
we're
good.
yeah, we'll have a good setup this year. So if you guys want to, log in and hang out with us while we watch the Nebraska games together, like a virtual watch party, we'll definitely make that available and show that what we're gonna have some pregame chats and some post-game chats. So like we're gonna be a great source for a lot of fun, I think, on Husker Saturdays, or at least if it's not fun, will be a good way to let off the steam, if you know what I mean.
I was gonna say, if you're looking for hard-hitting analysis, you probably are coming to the wrong channel, but we do offer our opinions and we do let off steam, and hopefully, we're happier this year than last year. I just remember
Yeah.
doing a playback for Georgia Southern, and that was probably one of the worst things I've done. It was miserable, it was awful, and you could see the train wreck happening right in front of you. So
Yeah, that
let's
was bad. If
let's
you go back and watch that, though, what's funny is because I remember we were down by 3 points and Nebraska got the ball, and I was like, I predict Nebraska's going to go down, get in field goal range, and miss the field goal, and that's exactly
yeah,
what
I
happened.
remember.
Like it was
I remember
predictable.
that.
You could
Yeah,
see it. It's just like a bad movie where you already know the ending. Like
I
it's
remember
just
that. Yep. Yeah, I remember
it's
that.
like
I'm
a
like,
and
I don't
then
know about that.
and then last, I don't know who these people are, why they're coming for us, but they had highlights of they're like cropping up Twitter highlights of the Michigan State game. They're like, oh, here's the Oklahoma game from
Mm.
2021 where your kicker missed like 4 field goals from 30 yards out. And you only lost by 9 points or 8 points.
That 2021 game was so frustrating.
Yeah,
I saw you post highlights of it the other day or
yeah,
yesterday it was, and I'm like, damn, I forgot about that one. It was
yeah.
that one and the
Yeah,
Wisconsin game that really pissed me off in 2021, and then the Michigan State game.
and the Michigan game.
I mean, the Michigan game, like, I just was happy to be in that game, if you know what I mean, because Michigan's such a good
Yeah,
team. Michigan State, I was ready to throw my computer out the window. But in
that was like I was like, okay, that like my Kool-Aid meter, my optimism meter for the Scott, that's just like the balloon just totally deflated, like down to you know like less than one, like
uh,
just barely above zero.
and to think the defense played that well under Eric Shenander
Oh, I
that
know,
year,
yeah, they did, yeah.
like that just mind blowing in of itself because Eric Shenander couldn't defend anything last year. And sure, you could blame it on the players, but when the defensive back is in the parking lot and the wide receivers are running curl routes and they go for 75-yard touchdowns, then you know that you kind of messed up.
Yeah, that was yeah. He's like, oh, we'll just play with a 10 yard cushion, see how it's like. It's like I
Meanwhile,
can see,
Peyton,
yeah, yeah.
Brian Holinsky is looking like Joe Montana as we're just sucking our thumbs and letting them walk right by us.
Yeah, everybody's like, "Oh, maybe Northwestern doesn't suck." No, they did. They were
That
horrible.
was
They
Pat.
were they got beat by like an FCS team. Like the
That,
next game they played at home.
that was Pat Fitzgerald's last win.
Oh man, what a disaster.
I mean, in Georgia Southern, and yes, folks, I realize we ended the last episode the exact same way, but it's fun to kind of relive the pain a little bit. Georgia Southern has stuff in the College Football Hall of Fame from when they beat Nebraska. Like, can you
Yeah.
imagine beating Nebraska, and that's like the biggest program you've beat, and your stuff ends up in the College Football Hall of Fame? Like, that's pretty bad. Like,
Yeah.
we're so bad, we can't beat anybody, but because we beat Nebraska, all of our cleats and our jersey and I think a towel ended up in the College Football Hall of Fame.
Not good, man. Not
Yeah.
good. Well,
That's
hopefully,
gonna change this year, I think.
yeah, hopefully Matt Rule ends up in the College Football Hall of Fame because of all the success and championships he wins at Nebraska.
We
So
are gonna
anyway,
rule the day, folks. Rule the
ru-
day.
rule the day, baby. We will rule the day. So with that, yeah, we'll be back with another episode this week. And thanks for all the support, you guys. Really appreciate it. Check out HuskerBigRed.com too. And as always, go Big Red.
I'm gonna take a nap. Go Big Red.